Okay, good morning. Pam and Jean, why don't you kick us off here? We're getting an update on economic indicators.
Yes, good morning. So we have with us, we have staff from the Planning Department, from their Research and Special Projects Division. We also have staff from the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, and they jointly put together information on quarterly economic indicators for the county. And as you can see from the materials in the packet, the attachment and the staff report, they have a set that they look at on a regular basis, and then they take up different topics at different quarters based on what they are viewing in the happenings of the county. So we thought this would be a great opportunity for the committee to hear about the indicators again. You had a briefing back in January on the same topic, and then have a discussion with staff about sort of things you'd like to see in the future, or get ideas from them about what they expect to see in the next couple quarters. So I will turn it over to them.
Thanks, Pam. Hi, I'm Corinne Blackford here from Planning Staff, the Research and Special Projects Division. And this is Brandon Bedford from the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. So we have been collaborating on this project for about 4 quarters now. And we've included in your packet 2 of the quarterly indicators, the most recent. So we're just going to go over what this project has been so far. And then at the end, we'll ask you for your feedback and hopefully give you some things that you can look forward to. Well, maybe I'll go this way. Maybe I'll go this way.
Side.
Maybe I'll click this.
The wheel?
It's, can't we get a...
I think this is the first slide. So,
keep asking, like, there are devices that are easier, and I've asked IT, and they say, oh, we've got one up there. I think that they may think it's this one, and... That's not it. Could you please say that Chair requests a better device? Thank you.
thanks. All right, so just a quick overview. So far there have been 4. The 5th one's coming out in November. And like Pam said, there's 2 main components. We've been publishing a set of what we think are key economic indicators about employment and real estate and capital investment in the county. And then we also include some rotating written features that highlight specific sectors or specific industry happenings. And at the end, we have some ideas for the ones we want to do in the future, but we know you guys also have ideas, so we want to hear them. So these are the regular indicators that we've included in every report so far. First, we look at the labor force, residents who are either working or looking for work. Then we look at the unemployment rate. That would be residents who are looking who cannot find a job. We look at at-place employment, which is also just the number of jobs in the county, which might be held by anyone from any other jurisdiction, or they could be our residents. And we also look at establishments, which is a business with a specific location. So it could be a business with many branches. It could be a mom and pop shop. An establishment isn't exactly the same thing as a business, but it's basically a business location. In the first report that we came out with, we gave very detailed definitions of each of these terms to sort of flesh them out for anyone who is not, steeped in these 24/7. Then we have some bullet points here just showing what we've seen so far. There's only been 4 of these reports, but so far there's just shy of 600,000 residents working or looking for work. That's our local labor force. We are second largest in the DMV, as we are in so many other areas. Second largest next to Fairfax County. Fairfax also has a slightly larger population, so we're just on par with them there. And then we have this very very low average unemployment rate, around 3%, and that's comparable to our entire region. And then at-place employment, we have just shy of 500,000 wage and salary jobs recorded in the county every quarter. And we are the 3rd highest there in the region. So first there's DC, which would make sense, the main job center in our region. Then Fairfax, then us. And right after us would be Prince George's County at 317,000. So the number of establishments has also held steady around 32,000 establishments just these past 4 quarters. And then DC is number one, as you'd expect, the main employment center, and then Fairfax, and then Prince George's.
So DC has a few more establishments than Fairfax, but quite a bit more jobs.
Right. So they have, if you think of a large establishment, many more jobs per one establishment. So establishments in themselves are sort of, you know, it's not good or bad. It's just an indicator of how many. But you could have 5 large establishments,
Sure.
or
HUD
you
is
could
one
have
establishment.
right.
And then also, this is Brandon Bedford for the record. Also, the way that federal installations are calculated in establishments data is very strange. So it's not always as reflective of how many offices there are. So there could be, you know, one federal agency that has 5 buildings downtown, but it might just be one establishment, but account for maybe 20 or 30,000.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not necessarily like a building footprint.
Okay.
So, you know, and if you have thoughts on how valuable that is, or if it's just confusing, do we continue to include it? Is there something else that would be more meaningful? We can definitely discuss that.
Quick question before you turn, the 470,000 at-place employment, and good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
That is the, any salary wage job in the county?
Right.
Yes.
And so the trend lines on that, is that a later slide or something, or
So-
what's, you know,
Right,
10 years
yeah.
back, what's that? We often hear no job growth, but I don't often see it used in this way.
So we have longer term trends. Our research and special projects came out with the trends report. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we can send that around again. And that looked at trends since 1990. And we looked at this specific number, these at-place wage and salary jobs since 1990. And that has basically grown with population. And then this number has been constant over the past 4 quarters, but that's a very short-term trend, obviously. I'm not sure you would even call it a trend if you're only looking at 4 quarters.
Over the last year, it's been.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, but the trends report would have over the last.
It would have the last 20, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just building off of that, and good morning as well to everybody. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about what are fair statistics and what aren't, and the new net establishments has been a bone of contention for some and a significant number for others. The 32,000 net establishments, or the 32,000 total establishments, has kind of been pretty consistent, as you have said before. And in terms of the 470,000 salary and wage, I understand the establishments, and the argument that has been made is that we have a different structure here and there are a lot of people who have their own business or an individual consultant, and whether or not that would necessitate a new establishment if they were just consulting. And so, and that's been an argument. I don't want to get into that argument right now, but I am curious on the 470,000 salary and wage jobs, if the individual is consulting and makes money as a consultant, does that get counted as one of the 470,000 salary and wage jobs, since they're not
It depends.
a wage earner?
It depends. So if they're incorporated, if they have filed paperwork to be an incorporated business.
Which is pretty rare.
Right, then yes.
And that's the argument, right? The argument is that here, those people don't incorporate because of the structure of our laws, and so that's the argument that people make, that the establishments is not a fair statistic because we actually have more sole proprietorships of people that aren't incorporated. Is that?
Yeah.
So the 470,000 would not include,
Include sole proprietorship.
yes.
Right.
Which
There
the
are.
argument is that that's a lot. I don't know that we have data to show what a lot means, but we've heard that it's a lot.
Well, we do have a data set that we haven't historically included in here from Bureau of Economic Analysis that will look at sole proprietorships. One of the challenges, one of the only caveats I would say with that is the way it counts sole proprietorships doesn't look at individuals, but rather each gig. So if you were like an individual consultant, but also like rented your house on Airbnb, you would be counted as like 2 sole proprietorships, even though you yourself are one person.
How much economic activity is that's not the same as a federal agency.
Right, exactly.
It's hard to get at.
Standpoint, and then the
Right.
challenge there, and it's not that we don't have the sole proprietorship data, we do. The challenge that I think that we have is we don't have an apples to apples comparison. So if we're going to make the argument that, well, some of our folks are sole proprietorships and they haven't incorporated, that's fine, but we don't have a very good data point then to make the comparison to Fairfax and to DC or whoever else are our peer group that we're looking at. And I don't know if we ever will or we ever could based on the differences with different jurisdictions, but I just wanted to clarify that for my own knowledge to know that the salary and wage job is similar to the establishments in the sense that there is a little bit of apples to oranges.
Right, right. And I mean, we can look at sole proprietorship data across jurisdictions, and then that would be apples to apples. But you're right, to try to combine that with the at-place numbers.
Yeah, the issue is who and what are sole proprietorships and why are they in the context of the legal framework and of the economic environment to determine whether or not it's comparing two like establishments or two like entities. And the challenge that I think that we have is that you have two groups of people who are discussing that data in very different ways, and one arguing one thing and one arguing the other. And I don't know that there's a way to get everybody on the same page to assess it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thanks for making it. I think that's a good.
I mean, it would be worth some exploration and
Definitely.
do a review. Because it has just been an issue out there.
Right, right.
So if you could shed some, I don't know that you need to track it on an ongoing basis.
Right. Well, we could have it as a special feature.
Snapshot.
We've definitely done some preliminary research in my division on sole proprietorships, looking at trying to quantify, consultants versus Uber drivers, things like that. It's messy, but we could do a special feature on it that sort of lays that out.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think that would be very helpful. And I was going to say, we have to be able to, with tax data, either comptroller or federal, I mean, maybe you need some data sharing agreements or whatever if they didn't exist, but to find out what's a $1, $5,000 gig, sole proprietorship versus someone who has a consistent, business where it's a job, and they're making real money and they're paying real taxes and it would literally be equivalent to one of these establishments and or more like a full-time salary and wage job.
Right.
So I think that's what would be helpful for us to know too, to tease that out. It wouldn't be perfect, but I think you could say, okay, set a threshold, who's making $100,000 a year or more as a sole proprietorship in Montgomery County, and I'd love to know that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's much easier to tease out at the national level, like they have IRS data at the national level, but then getting that locally. But we can definitely explore that and bring that back to you guys because I know it's of interest. Yeah. Thank you. So the next section, also featured in every issue, is real estate indicators.
Sorry. So are you done with the jobs numbers from what you just showed us? Is that the jobs?
Yeah. So is there something else you're hoping to see?
Yeah. I mean, I've talked with Caroline a bit about this, but Jeanette Chapman has a chart that she has shares that shows that in the region, that in this year, that basically almost 90% plus of the job growth in the region is now happening in Northern Virginia jurisdictions. I think we need to track the regional share of the pie.
Okay.
And just to understand the dynamics that are happening in this region. If there's a way you can.
We could probably do it with the wage and salary jobs on a quarterly basis. Not all data is available that readily. So because this is a quarterly report, we could also include just an annual snapshot in every report.
At least an annual,
Yeah.
not biannual. I mean, Jeanette has it. She might have it quarterly, but maybe you could confer with her. And see.
Okay.
But the trend line is kind of the underlying issue, and it's my understanding that historically the county generally was home to about a third of the job growth of the region, and that at the moment that has declined to single-digit percentage share of the region's growth.
Okay. And are you primarily interested in that actual growth, the differential, or are you interested in the overall share of the region? Because our growth in a lot of indicators is sort of tapping out and coming to this sort of steady plane. So it might be useful to show both if.
Both would be good. I mean, I think we just need to understand the trend line.
Okay.
And we need to think about what's it going to be like in this county and in this region if 10 years from now, all the new jobs that have been created over a 10-year period have been created in Tyson's, Crystal City. Like, if that happens, I think that's going to have huge negative consequences for people in this county because they're going to become extreme commuters by necessity. Whereas today, you can see we have a pretty strong job base here in the county. But for how long if there isn't growth? I think that basic question is one that I would really be helpful to monitor and track.
Okay, great. So I'll just return you to the real estate indicators. We have 3 main sections. We look at the office market, the retail market, our 2 major commercial categories, and then the residential market, which would include multifamily and then single-family owner-occupied residences. So when we look at the office market, things have been consistent over the past 4 quarters. Our vacancy rate averages about 12%. It's my understanding, based on long-term trends, that this has dropped since several years ago when we were tracking. It was actually much higher here in our county. DC is the only large office market in the region with a lower vacancy rate. So as far as suburbs are concerned, we are in good company in terms of our vacancy rate. The rents per square foot for office over the past year are about $30 per square feet in the second quarter of 2019, which is the last quarter that we have an indicators report for. Then if we jump over to the retail market, the vacancy rate there is much lower. It's actually been below 4% now. Fairfax is the only large comparable retail market in the region with the lower vacancy rate. And our rent per square foot is also around $30 per square foot in that market. If we jump down to residential, we can look at our single family, well, not necessarily just single family, but mainly single family owner occupied. Those prices are climbing very quickly. Just in the past 4 quarters, we saw a $68,000 increase. And the median rent prices for rental units have fluctuated across quarters. In the past 4 quarters, it's really just up and down. There's not a trend line there yet. But we can show you that in the trends report and elsewhere, the longer term trends.
Okay, Andrew, followed by Will.
Yeah, just I'm kind of curious on what are the data points that we decide are the ones that we ought to be looking at. In the previous slide we talked about unemployment. Well, unemployment isn't really a good indicator. I mean, it's fine to have as a baseline, but nobody's really looking at that and taking it terribly seriously in terms of determining our economic health, because we have a really low unemployment rate, and we judge ourselves not by how many people have jobs, but what kind of jobs those people have. I mean, that's the type of economic environment that we have. It isn't just having a steady paycheck, it's whether or not your paycheck can pay your bills.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a good point. I think because we're still coming out of the recession, it was higher during that point in time, and we did see changes there and in the real estate market. But yeah, now that we're out of that, we're sort of at this baseline that doesn't fluctuate. It's not something to highlight. For a broader audience, it might be. For us in our region, we're so used to being below.
I just mean in terms of the judgment, reflection and judgment of how well are we doing. That is not one that really gives us, tells us the story of whether we're doing well or not. I mean, we're going to be close to our regional counterparts within a tick one way or the other on unemployment. It's not a criticism. It's just a question really of, what are the data points that we should be looking for in terms of labor force and those questions. Is there a better data point? The same thing with here. Is it normal to have retail and residential where we are, the 30 per square foot, is that it's high, but high compared to what? I mean, we also have land values that are high. So
context.
What's the proportion of land costs to I mean, I don't know if there's a way to parse this out to.
Yeah, we could have like maybe even national benchmarks. I mean, that might help. If you're having regional benchmarks, we're a region, we're very similar to everyone else in our region, despite the sort of interest in how are we doing with our neighbors. Well, we're on par with our neighbors, basically. But it might be interesting to have other regions in the country as well that you could look at.
And we've also had some looking at submarkets within the county. Because different parts of the county behave different ways. In a jurisdiction with over 1 million people, we have a lot of different communities. In our Q4 indicators, we took a look at office submarkets within the county to kind of see what variations looked like with respect to vacancy, inventory, price per square foot. And that's something we can definitely share with you. And also, because I don't think that issue is in your briefing packet, we can definitely share that and also maybe build that out for some others just to get a sense of how different parts of the county are behaving.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a peer group of like submarkets would be helpful because that's how they're actually competing. And so the argument is that, we can't be competitive. Who are they being competitive for retail cost or for an office cost or for a residential cost?
Yeah, there's definitely, we could do some qualitative research on that, talk to our folks at CoStar who provide much of this data for us, and they have their thumbprint on the real estate market because they work with people who are developing real estate, and say, does it make sense for us to highlight, the Houston area and which other major regions maybe would make sense?
Yeah, and I think the markets even within the region, because comparing Montgomery County to Fairfax is not as helpful, I think, as it would be to compare the Pike District to Tyson's Corner, which, in terms of what whatever the case may be, but, or a specific, Arlington to Bethesda. I mean, I think it would be, more helpful for us to really understand, because in the environment, it's not Montgomery County competing against Fairfax, it's a specific part of Montgomery County competing against a specific part of Fairfax.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole picture is important too, but I think something a little bit more specific would be really helpful, particularly on the real estate side of things.
Okay.
I would be interested in some information about the bio market in the county and generally, as well as geographically, the Great Seneca Science Corridor area. Tomorrow, we're taking up the work program for the planning department, and I'm recommending that we introduce an amendment to the Great Seneca Science Corridor master plan to release development capacity that was staged in such a restrictive manner that it can't really move forward. And I think there's confusion about the market, the bio market, because we hear a lot about how only transit proximate commercial markets are really thriving, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case in the bio market, and that area is not presently served by transit, but I think there could be, my sense is it's pretty strong. So I think that if you could, if we get this master plan amendment through, you'll need to do it anyway for that. So I guess we'll get it in the course of that.
Okay, and we're talking more specifically about real estate investment and real estate indicators, because we do have an issue of this report that focused on biohealth industries and biohealth businesses.
Good.
Yeah.
We'll get to, I guess,
Okay.
maybe we'll get to.
But it doesn't really delve into descriptions of their real estate needs or real estate demand in that sector, but that is something else we could do.
We'll
Build off of that.
Sure, if you're on that topic.
Yeah, I was
Well,
just
next.
I think that would be helpful in the context of what I was just saying. Our biohealth industry, at least currently, is heavily focused in one particular geographic area, and there are other areas that might be comparable to that we might be competing with. And in California and in Massachusetts, for instance. So maybe that is that is where we tie the two things together to say, okay, what's the geographic area where we're focusing, and what are the rents looking like for lab space? What are the rents looking, and how does that compare? Because when these businesses are deciding whether to come here or to go to Boston or to go to Silicon Valley, that's the decision that they're making. What is the cost? What is the talent? What are the access to the resources? So I think there is a way to connect it where just having it in the context of bio as an industry and not including the real estate portion of it, because we frequently hear, and I know EDC is working and and the executive branch and others are working on the access to the real estate that is needed, like lab space, in order to be able to do it. And so it'd be helpful, rather than just talking about, we know this is a problem, to actually have some data that we can look at.
Sarah.
Hi there. I'm glad that you brought up bio as an example. We did in fact look at it in one of the economic indicators, but this is a good example of an industry that's very complex and it's changing rapidly. And the indicators are just one tool that we use, right? And so if we were only looking at that, then all of these things would need to be put into the indicators. But as we look at indicators, we also want to look at the JLL study that we did recently, which in fact shows that the future of bio is much more urban. And so while it is important to be able to have the capacity and everything that is happening in the science corridor, the market is telling us some very different things. And it's telling us different things in places like Boston, and it's also telling us different things when we hear businesses, and we've talked to them recently. We've talked to developers who have come into us and said, I cannot believe we got this call from this company, and they really want to be in a different location in the county. So I would just urge us to use this as a tool, use the JLL data as a tool, and not rely on one.
So more United Therapeutics, less GSK. And as far as location, they're both great companies. I want to say that.
I wouldn't say more or less. I just think we need to be open to
being
what
in
businesses
different-
want.
Have both.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look, there are absolutely companies that are doing amazing things in low rent areas in Gaithersburg, and that's what they picked because they said this is what we need to do. But so we need to offer them
Need a menu.
a menu. Yep.
A lot of opportunity. Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you all have, I have seen EDC do some comparisons on, as compared to Boston, where we're ranking in this in BioHealth, and we have these numbers. So I don't know. I guess that's the type of data and research you're talking about. I don't know where you pull that from or what you use to present that, but I've heard that from you all before.
In terms of being the fourth?
Yes.
Yeah, well, so there are, as we all know about data, there are data sources that come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
We are confident that BHI has come out with 4, and we think there is a lot of, obviously, merit to that. We do think, again, like I said earlier, our bio industry is evolving in very good ways. And we're starting to bring in some interesting pieces, particularly related to devices that we really hadn't seen before. And that has really changed even in the last 2 to 3 years.
Right. Well, that was not my main point, but I benefited from the discussion from my colleagues. But so if you look back to the presentation, vacancy rates actually going down a little bit or staying stable. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But and the rent is going up over the last, okay. Vacancy rate also has decreased in retail, so office and retail. And rent still going up. Home prices going up. I was looking, it's from $435 to $488 now. That's
1 year?
In less than 1 year.
That's not good.
No, and that's not good for affordability. And so I wonder, I think you said it, you made a good point. I always you said, we are on par with our neighbors. I tend to agree. I think, a lot of times for various reasons, different parties, say, oh, the sky is falling, we're not doing that well. And while we can always improve, I think, this is showing us that there is some strength in this market. And we have a lot of people that are doing a lot of things, job growth, more people participating in the labor force, unemployment down. I guess my question would, building on what you said about, and I'm sorry, what is your name?
Brandon.
Brandon, sorry. I think it's really important next time we have one of these to have it in the context of seeing what's going on around the county, because it's not really it doesn't help me that much knowing that this is like taking school data and lumping everyone together. We know that different parts of the county are not performing and are not seeing the same level of activity. Or I'm sure there's parts where unemployment is up, for example, in parts of the county. So I think we need to at least have that as an addendum to the packet so that we can, following on Andrew's point, we want to know for comparison to other jurisdictions, but we also know within jurisdictions as we're making policy and particularly looking at equity dynamics, which we're working on right now, where do we need to have an additional focus? Do we need to know what's going on? And I just think that needs to be embedded. I would just ask staff going forward, I just think that always needs to be a part of this, because even if we don't discuss it explicitly, we need to have the data so that we're aware and we can try to adjust. And I kind of heard you saying that, but that would be helpful.
Definitely.
I think the issue of us being on par, I think if you look at the size of the county, the scale of the county, we are comparable to our neighbors. But I think if you look at the trend lines are very different today than they used to be. And I think you need to say, will we still be on par 10 years from now? That's a fundamental issue. And so we will get into that, but it's, the county that we all know and love was based on annual growth in jobs that supported the quality of life and the budget revenues that we have. And there was a steady clip of strong growth in good paying jobs. And, we all assume that continues. But we need to watch that, and we need to understand whether it really is continuing or not. What I'm seeing, some data that I am concerned about, is that it may not be continuing. To the bio issue, I really feel like we need to have a urban bio market to match our suburban bio market. And that way the companies can go wherever they prefer. Some will want to be in Seneca because that's where the vaccine hub is and that's where the NCI is, and whatever reason they want to be there. And then another group will say, no, we want to be in Bethesda or Silver Spring because we're anticipating we're trying to pull a different group of people, into like more of a millennial urban context. So I think it's got to have both, is my feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all agree.
Yeah.
That's the case. But
I
one of
just
the
wanted
other
to
things,
state it.
as we think about bio and its evolution, and the fact that you're adding now into bio big data, and you're adding in cybersecurity, and you're adding in wearables and all these other things that are not traditionally Montgomery County wet lab space. And so that is much simpler to put in a more urban area.
Absolutely. Good point. Okay, so continuing.
Right. So Brandon's going to talk about this indicator that we have included, which is not, I would say the indicators we went over before are very common. Every jurisdiction everywhere is looking at their vacancy rates and their rent prices and their at-place employment. This is something we felt was important in part because of our tech and bio, which has been receiving a lot of investment. So take it away, Greg.
Great, thank you. So we wanted to include venture capital for a variety of reasons, because as we know, venture capital is just one type of equity investment that you can make in a business. We selected venture because it's typically the highest risk investment that an investor can take. It's often before a company is generating revenue and there's just a lot of uncertainty. So companies also have a very hard time raising the money. So we like to try to use the amount of venture capital that our businesses are raising as a proxy for the kinds of innovative technology that are happening in our community. So we're getting a sneak peek at the Q3 edition because this is a real-time database I'm using, whereas a lot of our other more standard indicators have built-in lag times. So in the first 3 quarters of 2019, Montgomery County businesses raised over $370 million in venture capital. That's the largest in all of the DMV, including Baltimore, Richmond, Norfolk, with the exception of Fairfax County at $422 million. And that our slowdown compared to last year, because last year was a record-breaking year where our businesses raised over $600 million in venture capital in 2018. But that slowdown this year is in line with national and regional trends, just as a whole have slowed down. DC in particular had quite a slump because they were ahead of us last year with about 650, but so far in the first 3 quarters of the year, they're only around 200. And there can be a lot of variability in the Mid-Atlantic with year-to-year deal flow, just because we don't have the volume of, say, like California or Massachusetts. But we definitely have a lot of great trends moving in that direction. And we also do fairly well in terms of the numbers of deals. Sometimes we have larger dollar amounts but fewer deals, and part of that is a result of our life sciences clusters. It takes a lot more money to support a life sciences company than it does virtually any other tech vertical. But we still do really well. We're usually number 2 or 3 in the entire tri-state region for deal flow as well. And then really, like I said before, BioHealth is really our big driver in our venture capital. But we definitely have seen a lot of health tech emerging, which is a lot of the technology that's kind of in parallel to biohealth and life sciences. We've met with some exciting companies. One of our issues talks about a company called Mitonomy that is a minority-owned company that relocated from the Bay Area to here. Because they really thought Bethesda was the place to grow their business properly. And really to be near the serious science research, be near NIH, quick access to hospitals in New York and Boston. They're in process of doing some fundraising right now.
Wasn't the CEO at the first PHED MCEDC roundtable? Is a woman?
I think.
Okay.
I wasn't there either, but I think so, yes. I do believe she was there. So, they're a great company, and there's several others. I feel, every couple of weeks I see a new one raising capital in Bethesda and Silver Spring. So that's a growing area. And there's other verticals. The more we play with this data, because it's a relatively new data set to us, we're starting to see some other things. Like there's an emerging hospitality tech vertical that's kind of growing to be close to like Choice and Marriott and all of our hospitality cluster. So those are really the trends that we're seeing there.
Thank you. This was very helpful. I was going to ask, is this like new? Because I hadn't seen a lot reported in this level of specificity around venture. And we have been talking in these MCDC meetings about who's taking risk, who's not, why aren't they, where is it happening, what industries. So this is very interesting and heartening to see. Hospitality tech, give me an example.
Sure. So there's a few different companies. One in particular that I think has like a great backstory is My Digital Office. They relocated to Bethesda from Seattle. And what they do is, turns out that with hotel operators, they're not as far along as some other industries in terms of automation and making things cloud-based. And even a lot of hoteliers today will print reams and reams of paper every single night to talk about the status of the room and like who checked in, who checked out. It goes in a banker's box. It sits in a storage unit for 7 years. Not very efficient. So his company really kind of automates all of those processes and then puts them in the cloud and also into an automatic dashboard setting. So a hotel manager wakes up in the morning and then all of the information that they need to know is like right there on their tablet in an interactive dashboard. It also includes like benchmarks against other hotels in the same tier and the same geography. It's really incredible stuff. There's also another startup in Bethesda that was recently acquired by a hospitality tech conglomerate in Beijing, but they are not moving. In fact, they have doubled their footprint since acquisition. They love being in Bethesda. They really view Bethesda as kind of the heart of the North American hospitality industry, and they're super pumped. And the startup in particular that was acquired does a lot of the back-end software for you to do self-check-in on your phone, to pick your room and do all of that on your phone. So after your flight's delayed and you're wandering in, you can just go straight to your room.
So this will be helpful too, because you can see what people are doing, what the market is doing, well, who's coming here, why are they coming here? You can bake that into your pitching, into what's here and what's not, and see where those trends are. That's very interesting. What's the name of the data set? I'm just curious.
Oh, the which one?
The data set where you pull this information.
Oh, PitchBook is the name of the database that we use for this.
Awesome, thank you. And this will be going forward. I'm assuming we'll include the venture, because I just think there's so much. You just got the last week or the week before, they're running together, but we found out again that Maryland's the wealthiest state in the nation again. In Montgomery County, the wealthiest county in the wealthiest state. And if you're looking at median income, so there's a lot of money here. My point, that doesn't necessarily get spent, but if we have all these emerging industries where people are taking risk and it's paying off, it can help us build a case. We talked about having like a venture summit of sorts. I think there'll be a good PHED committee activity or individual activity, or with my colleagues, to get some of those people in the room and have a really strong presentation about what is already happening, where the opportunities might be to invest. So obviously work with EDC on that, but I just wanted to throw that idea out there.
And Carrie McCarthy, for the record, I just wanted to add why we've been so happy to work with MCDC on this, because a lot of the data planning has access to is really lagging indicators. It takes 6 months to get out quarterly employment data. Where this database, and they're so on the ground, it really gives a better sense of leading indicators. So really the goal of this publication has been to do a real quick 4 to 5 page high level look at what's going on in the county using both leading and lagging indicators. Also really appreciate all of your great feedback. It helps us think about how we can customize it and sort of do more rotational issues going forward. Definitely understand the ongoing need for trend data and sub-county information.
Good comments. Yeah, we're hearing a lot about the need to try to get capital more focused on investing locally, and definitely a topic we will want to take up through the committee, and council members may do their own explorations there. I wanted to note, last week BioHealth Innovation convened a summit on capital in the biohealth sector, the National Capital Region. Unfortunately, the county is not presently supporting BioHealth Innovation, but we are working on a renewed partnership. But we're all talking about the urgent need to get capital to see the opportunities here, and BHI is actually doing that work. They convened a summit with investors, to make those connections. So, we have to, I think, identify programs to support BHI going forward. Andrew.
Thank you. Is it possible to parse out how much of the venture funding is local?
Yes.
Or even regional?
Yes, and actually I do have that on the next slide. Oh. So I can even just kind of give you the quick synopsis.
You're good. You are very good.
So one of the things we find most interesting. Oh wait, don't restart. It's. Oh, it's okay. I can get it. Oh, thanks. There we go. Okay. And then do you have the? What do you? Oh, you got it. Wait. Oh, too far. How do you go back? Too far. Wait. Okay.
One more.
Aha. So yes, this is where I want to be. So in issue 2, which was Q4 of 2018, we did a little more of a deep dive into where investment was coming from. So we looked at investors, and not every single investor is disclosed in SEC documentation for a variety of reasons. But of the investors documented, only 15% were from Maryland, DC, or Virginia. Actually, we had more investors from China and South Korea than we did locally. And especially some of our top dollar, like Viela Bio, which was our largest, it was actually one of the largest venture capital deals in 2018 outside of California. It was $282 million. And that was almost exclusively funded by 4 investors. If I remember correctly, there were 2 from China, 1 from South Korea, and 1 from Singapore. So like a lot of our top dollar deals are financed internationally, and also from California and Massachusetts.
I raised it because my sense was that, the plural of anecdote isn't data, but I hear all the time from people that they don't raise money here, that they have to get on a plane and fly to Silicon Valley to to Boston or internationally, or go meet with people who are international at one of those places in order to get funding. And so I think that is the most significant opportunity to figure out how we vertically integrate our community around economic development in a way that we haven't before. And I don't think that's a unique challenge to Montgomery County. I think that is the challenge of converting a government town into a private sector town. And we have a lot of private sector opportunity here, but I'm not sure that the infrastructure is set up for the investment and the connections that we need. I know we're working on it, and I think that we really need to double down and focus on it, because obviously the challenge of other companies investing, or other people from outside the region investing in these companies, is that the flight risk is massive. And so the growth risk is massive. So even if they keep what they currently have, all of the spin-off companies and all of the other opportunities that are created as a result are less likely to happen here. And so bringing as much as we can locally is critical, not just in attracting the entrepreneurs, but in making sure that the investment is coming from here as well, because lots of times eventually a company will pick up and move some type of operation closer to where their funding comes from, and not enough of the funding comes from here, and that's a significant challenge.
All right.
Oh, definitely. I was just going to say, in the last 2 years, we have had a trend that could really lend well to kind of getting local investors more integrated. I think, just kind of based on my own research, up until the last maybe 2 or 3 years, a lot of folks were a little bit more risk averse to life sciences investing just because they didn't understand it. So a lot of it was more like, giant institutional funding of some sort. But in more recent years, there's been an increasing interest in life sciences. People are a little more comfortable investing. And also there's been an increased interest in not investing in California. So due to issues with hypervaluations and such. So those are two trends that, lend itself very well to Montgomery County, kind of getting organized and getting some more investors locally excited.
Well, again, I just want to observe, the county government is not really doing anything specifically right now to support bio. We have 1 or 2 small programs that we are funding, but other than that, we actually are not doing much, which is kind of shocking when you think this is our strongest card, and yet we don't have an array of programs that are strategic to the sector. I think institutions all have responsibilities in the area. I know that the EDC is in conversation with bio companies, sure. So you as an organization are in the sector, but specific tailored programs designed to, let alone just a general strategy. We took this up in the budget this year, when the funding was set, Councilmember Freeds and I were like, we need a bio strategy. We're not funding one now. It's time to actually focus on that. So
this could be a whole other conversation.
Yes, that was and that's what I was going to say. It is a whole other conversation, and we need to put that in our queue here, and
I would say
try to get everything together.
Actually, and I think you were at our board meeting this morning when this came up, but there was the conversation about bio as an example of when Jerome came to talk about the county executive's legislation, the comprehensive plan, and how our organization fit into that, and in fact how council fits into that, and how other organizations and stakeholders fit into that. But the example was, and we could have spent more time kind of describing it, but when we did the biolab pilot project earlier this year, the MCEDC did, and I'm going to say with our own money, but you know what I mean by that. It was just within our budget. I just want you to know that it's not ours, but it was within our budget. And I think that was a really good example of where there are so many people who are involved with bio here. But we knew that there was this lingering problem of small wet lab space, and we couldn't quite get there, right, with it. And so it was a great opportunity for our organization to say, okay, look, we're going to take this on and we're going to do this pilot project, because we should be doing pilot projects, right, for a variety of things that we think need to happen in the marketplace. And so we will go through this, and then at the end, we'll tell you what we've learned. And it might be that we say to the county executive, hey, you have to go over to council and put money into some fund to do something. Or it could be something that has to be done with zoning that we need to do. And I don't know what that is, but in those ways, is that proper grammar? We can take certain issues and kind of explore them as an entity and then kind of assign, right, how we attack these problems. Recommend, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we need to be doing. So is the bio lab, the wet lab
Pilot project.
is it funded? Are you funding?
So we have our money set aside.
Yeah.
We have had a lot of inquiries,
Yeah.
and we have been talking to developers and small businesses. We haven't had a formal application yet, but it is going to be soon, I believe.
Good. I think that is a great example of the kind of initiative that we need to have. I think another 10 of those, would represent a fuller strategy.
And one other thing we can talk about at some point too is not just the entrepreneurship piece, and I think Alana brought this up today in our board meeting as well, is in addition to all the entrepreneurship pieces, you also really have to have those businesses that are the growing businesses that can then acquire, right, the startups. And so that's a whole nother piece of having a healthy bioecosystem.
All right, so that's a big topic. We'll put that in our committee agenda plan, and just encourage everybody to put their thinking caps on about that and talk to people, and we'll pull some strategy together. All right.
Great. So that really wraps up. I know we already talked about the issue where we had the county submarkets and diving into some economic indicator terms. We will flip to the next slide for what we've done in the, too far. Wait, how did you do it? Oh, hey.
You know what? We'll just do this manually.
That sounds good. There we go.
Let's go back to slideshow. Is this the
I think that's the one. Too far.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Okay.
My apologies.
There we go. Now we're there. Okay. So then in the narratives that are in the briefings that you have in your packet, we started looking at understanding local tech industry outside of biohealth and life sciences, kind of what that looked like from an employment standpoint, as well as digging a little bit into some venture trends. Also introduced the concept of opportunity zones. And then in issue 4, our most recent issue, we looked a little more at the local hospitality sector. Because we have so many different things happening here, of course, with, the world's largest hotel chain, headquartered here, Marriott, and then Choice, one of the world's largest, and then also just all of the ancillary businesses like the REITs, the hoteliers, the managers, that are all located here.
Circle 8 of the packet, right? The fact sheet on the hospitality industry?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. So really kind of unpacks it and explains that because our hospitality sector is so big and in so many places, it's not easily tracked by the hospitality NAICS code. A lot of it is tracked under corporate, under corporate NAICS, under financial management. It's really recorded in a variety of places. So that was really fun to dig into. And then, of course, we talked about Thrive Montgomery 2050. So... And then that wraps up our narrative pieces. And then, we've gotten a lot of feedback from you already and would love to hear a little bit more about any other special features or areas of interest. Some areas of interest to us are talking about federal tech transfer and agritourism and fintech. Also, federal procurement spending was something that came up at planning board. So we got a few different ideas and would love to hear any of yours that we can explore.
Okay. Interesting. Definitely federal tech transfer. I would really appreciate your going as big as you can. I'm really hoping that the new CEO of the EDC will make a big priority here and really start putting some resources into our game plan there. And as you know, we had a great discussion a couple weeks ago with the EDC and the committee, and we outlined a lot of ways that we could be doing more there. And talk to us about what you mean with federal procurement spending. So is these are items that you would like to track? Is that what you're pointing to, or?
These are ideas for more featured sections in future editions. And the federal procurement spending was a question that had come up back in July when we presented phase 2 of the trends report. And we have some data. It just requires some level of effort to crunch the numbers that we haven't had the capacity for. But we're trying to create that capacity to put in our pipeline because I know it was of interest to you.
I think that would be of great interest, absolutely. Certainly agritourism is a good one. Yeah, these are all good. FinTech, workplace tech advancement trends. Now, so that would be a feature you would look into. Talk about that. What is workplace tech advancement trends?
Hi. Sure. So it's sort of hinging on the sort of popular press right now where we talk about workplace automation. It's obviously happening in the transportation industry. What other industries is it really, I guess, being implemented already? I thought that might be an interesting feature. Again, it would be high level. This is a very short report, but the idea is also that sometimes if we highlight some of these things, maybe it sparks interest and it becomes a deeper dive for us later.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's sort of the issue of like the whole economy is being driven by technology. Changes in the economy are being driven by technology. So having a tech-driven economy does not mean that you are going to have tech companies necessarily, as much as every company is going to be changing what it does in that area. So your workforce, your workforce's ability to do that is going to have a huge impact on companies and whether they are able to grow here and succeed and compete, or whether they sort of peter out because other regions have the workforce that enables those changes, and then those companies kind of win in the marketplace, right? So tech is embedded in every sector now, and I think that's why you're seeing these super regions, frankly, in the country, of Bay Area, New York, Boston. It's like the role of technology in every company is just so big now. Mm-hmm. Andrew.
Thanks. I just want to build on that. A couple things. One, I definitely think that the last two items, the workplace tech advancement and the warehousing and logistics, to Chair Reamer's point, I mean, those are global trends, and the question of how do all of our business, how does our entire economy adjust and adapt to this changing global landscape?
Right.
And I think that's a critical question. I think that's a terrific topic of research and reporting that would be really helpful in analysis, that really helpful to us as policymakers. And I think it comes with lots of challenges, but it also comes with lots of opportunities, and figuring out how we mitigate the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities is an area that I don't think we've done as well as we could in being, having forethought of really getting ahead of these trends, not reacting to them, but getting ahead of them. And so I think that's really helpful. I think in the other areas, they're all really important, but it just strikes me this morning, I was at the Economic Development Corporation Board meeting. We did get the presentation from Jerome Fletcher of the new comprehensive economic plan. In that same packet, I also was looking at going back through what I've read before, the EDC's strategic plan. We're also having conversations here at the Council on Economic Development. Now I'm seeing other topics here of particular areas, and the first four are kind of industry areas. Federal tech transfer is an industry area. Federal procurement spending is an industry area. Federal contracting. Agritourism, or agriculture more broadly, is an industry area. Financial technology, fintech, is an industry area. And I just hope that now is a really good opportunity, as we're having all of these conversations somewhat together, somewhat in isolation, that we get on the same page and figure out what are the 4 or 6 main areas that we're going to have, and that we just consistently talk about them all the time. I think that the last 2 are separate. I mean, those are kind of global trend questions that affect every industry, as Chair Reamer mentioned. But I think as the comprehensive economic plan comes over to this side of the street after they get feedback not only from the EDC but from other stakeholders, once we decide on what those key focuses are, I think we all need to have those as the consistent industries that we are always looking at and always focusing on and judging ourselves against, so that we can be consistent, so that we can all be working in the same page, and so that we're not getting caught up at potentially focusing on a shiny new object and not focusing on the things that really are our strength in the area where we really see the opportunity for long-term economic growth and opportunity.
Definitely. So just because you mentioned it, the council passed a law 5 years ago that required the executive branch to devise a comprehensive economic development strategy. That report was produced, very substantial, and there is a kind of outline, which is the regulatory version, the regulation that is sort of summarizes the report or the vision. And the one that we have now that's in effect is somewhat outdated. You can flip through it and it needs to be refreshed. So we need to update it. The executive branch is supposed to bring over an updated version of that economic development strategy. Again, it's very top level. It's like an outline of a strategy. It's not, but it's helpful. I think it's helpful for everyone to kind of understand it. The way I would like this process to work is the executive branch will do a draft, but the new EDC CEO should have a real voice in that, and the EDC should have a voice, and then the council will take it up, based upon that input. So,
Isn't that what was presented this morning?
well,
So our process, our interaction with the county exec's office to date has been that we looked at their suggestions and we gave them some input and went back and forth just a little bit. And then today Jerome presented it, and then this is the version that will go out on November 1st. And then MCEDC will make another kind of more formal recommendation or provide comment so that you know what our position is. There is nothing in it, though, I will say, that conflicts with or is contradictory to our work plan. And I think everyone agrees with all of the industries that are chosen, and the fact that also we have to look at entrepreneurship just generally across the board. So
that's good. I just politically, frankly, I want the new CEO to have the benefit of having had a voice in that process, if at all
I don't
possible.
know if they'll be.
Hopefully that person will be on. If that process stalls out, that would be disappointing, but,
At the table, we discuss it, right?
what's that?
Could have this new CEO at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They will be here, yeah.
Yeah, either way, however we do it, I just want that to happen. I just think it's important.
And along those lines, great to hear that that's all moving forward. We do need a choir sheet, though, and what I mean by that is, I think if we're all in agreement, a really 1 to 2 page document that just lays this out on here's Montgomery County strategy, and anyone who cares to talk about it or recruit, and because I've said from the beginning, we all need to be. You got a new council, you've got a lot of new people, you got a lot of energy, excitement. You're gonna have a new EDC chair, you're gonna have a new work source person. So I think a condensed version, and maybe that's already happened, but with your viewpoint on it and with what EDC's mission is and what outcomes we want to see, and that's in line with your work plan, I think that document for me and I think for others will be very helpful. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Just to build off of the choir sheet, which I agree with, but I also think for all of us here, not just EDC, this isn't directed specifically at you, but for all of us, there's a lot of talk of different communities, different core areas that are, allegedly the focus of the county, and they're not consistent. And they're not consistent in the EDC strategic plan. They're not consistent with what we talk about here and what is talked about across the street. And we haven't all gotten on the same page. We talk here about the Pike District, North Bethesda, White Flint area as a main area of focus. That's not mentioned in the strategic plan. That I believe so, yeah, as a core area. We talk about White Oak here as a key area, an area of significant focus, also not mentioned. We don't have that written down on our end. Anyway, we talk about it a lot, but it's not formally written down of, here are the areas that we see tremendous opportunity. The science corridor, is a key area. So Bethesda, I don't believe, is mentioned, which has half of our businesses. So again, it's not a criticism of EDC. It's a reflection of the fact that
I'd like to explain, though, our work plan.
I'm happy to allow you to do that, but I think in addition to that, not just with EDC, but with all of us, we should be putting down, and whether it's, we add it to the comprehensive plan, which I don't believe has been part of the conversation of looking geographically at priority areas, or of whether we have a separate document there, but that we all are talking about the key focus areas in the same way, so that we don't go to briefings and say, this is a key area that we're focused on, but then there's nowhere that it's written down, and then at different points in time, different organizations and different parts of the government are focusing on different areas. Because I think not just in the industries that we're talking about, but in the areas that we're talking about, that's an important part of the economic development strategy and the way that we talk about economic development as well, and the way that we judge ourselves, frankly, with how well we're doing. We're talking about, the Pike District, White Flint area being a key area, and if you looked at one of the past slides, that's an area where some of the highest vacancy rates are. We're not doing well in that area. If you look at the broader area there in Twin Brook, it abuts some of the most challenging social and economic issues among residents. So we're falling short, and so I think that we all need to get on the same page there as well. But I'm happy to let you explain the core areas. But it was a broader point that I'm trying to make, not just related to the EDC, but more about all of us getting on the same page and including geographic areas of focus just as much as industry areas of focus.
Do you want me to go into it? Okay. So when we had come in the spring to talk about, I guess it was during the budget hearing, probably was the last time when we came, and I think David had presented our plans for FY20 and a draft of our work plan. And we had talked at the time and explained that when MCEDC began, the board was really focused on industries, right? And so we didn't really talk about geography at all. And as this has evolved, this was the first year when we said, you know what, we really do. And I don't mean to make an excuse that we're small staff, but we are small, right? And so we're looking at industries, and industries for the most part are kind of agnostic about, at least those coming in, like where they want to be. They've done some research, but they either want to be like, we want to be near Metro, or we want something that's really affordable and what have you. But when we decided, and we knew that people would have some comments about it, we decided we have the one work plan item that has to do with core communities. And that was because we felt that Silver Spring, Wheaton, Gaithersburg, and downtown Rockville were those that still have some work to be done in them. And we think that there is, in our community, right, it's a big community, and you can't have 14 downtowns that are thriving. But we thought that those four represented a wide variety of both residents, different types of businesses, different types of opportunity, and also had faced different types of struggles, basically, economically. And I think we said that we would focus 30%, just 30%, right, very focused on those communities, figuring out how to help with entrepreneurship, how to get bio, how to do all of these things. That leaves 70% of our time, right, for all of these other places. And we certainly do spend a lot of time working in White Flint and working with the developers there and working with getting companies who want to relocate to Pike and Rose. And we certainly spend time in Germantown as well and with others. We just thought that it was important to say, listen, we hear you. We know that these are important centers of activity in the community. And we want you to know that we're going to measure ourselves to make sure that we're not always taking the path of least resistance, and we're going to really try to get investment in these communities.
I appreciate that, and I think it's perfectly legitimate. Again, not a criticism of EDC. It's a criticism of our total economic development cohesion, that you picked those areas for reasons that are logical. We talk about areas of focus for reasons that are logical. The county executive and his administration talks about areas of focus for reasons that are logical, but we're all talking about different places. We have not talked about your core areas as areas that we're focused on economic development. I don't think at any point have we had a policy discussion since I have been here where we have said, we're going to do this policy because it somehow coincides with what the Economic Development Corporation is focusing on core areas, because there's a perfectly good reason for why they decided that. That doesn't make any sense, in my view. What would make sense is if we all agreed and decided on what are the core areas where it's most important to focus our economic development activities for various reasons. The investment that we're making in White Oak with FDA's expansion there, that makes sense to me. The need for the White Flint Pike District area to meet its economic development potential, which I think without that, it doesn't work. You know, I think Wheaton doesn't work without that working, because we need an east-west connection there, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bethesda being the place where, you know, half the businesses in the county currently are, you know, just like Bio, we shouldn't be neglecting our strengths. I'm not saying that I'm right and the other one is wrong. I'm just saying we're literally talking about different things at the same time, and I think everybody just needs to get on the same page. And I think now is a really good opportunity with a new CEO coming to EDC, with the comprehensive plan being formalized, with all the stakeholders providing input, with the council now having its own conversation about economic development and what our role is, that we should be figuring out what's everybody's roles and how we all fit into one broad economic strategy, because the reality is, to the outside world, there is no distinction between EDC and the county council and the county executive. We are the county. And it's the county is either helpful or the county is not. The county is supporting business growth here, or the county is not. The county is focused on this, or the county is not. And so we have to, I think, focus our own efforts and our own energy on being the county and having some level of cohesion and some level of agreement on what our areas of focus are.
Yeah, you know, there's a question about more place or geographic focused economic development and how the county implements that. And really, it's my feeling that the executive branch is seeking to have more of that capacity internally at the executive branch, so that we can deal with, you know, a specific challenge or a community that just needs more person power to try to spur some private investment. It of course is not easy to start listing communities that should be priorities, and so once you put down one of them, then you end up with 13, and then, you know, everywhere is a priority, and then you're back to where you started. So, you know, I guess I wasn't, when you said that you spend 30% of your time working in those particular areas.
That's our metric. And we presented this in the spring,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we just thought of it.
Again, I just want to clarify again, I'm not being critical of the Economic Development Corporation's decision to pick those core areas. I'm being critical and reflective of all of our participation in listening to you talk about those core areas, signing off on it, saying, sounds great, go ahead, having our own conversations about what our priorities are, having the county executive have his priorities and the administration priorities, and saying if we're going to have a serious conversation about having a comprehensive economic development strategy, that needs to be part of it too. That was the point that I was trying to
I
make.
guess my reaction to that is, like, when there is a strategic focus, I think it's good to, I think you can get people together around, this is what we need to be doing in this particular area. It's a little harder to get everyone to say that these are the 4 areas that matter most. And there's a
We're
sort of
doing
a,
that.
well, are we
not
really?
agreeing on it.
Are we really? So,
Well, we could certainly have a conversation about, not to keep pushing this off to have, but economic development is a complex thing, right? And so if we want to evolve into a county, us, you, county executive, that looks more specifically at geography, let's do that. I mean, obviously, with us saying that these were our core communities, we have gotten a lot of people saying, oh, and it started a conversation. So in that way, I'm satisfied. Like, let's talk about whether we want to do that. Mm-hmm. Moving forward.
yeah, no, I think we do need to try to get all on the same page about that. So, Another item for the queue.
You're doing a great job,
Thanks.
and we're going to get there.
Well, everybody is doing a great job.
No, I agree. I'm saying we're going to get there.
It's really an exciting time. I know that everyone says that, but with the new council, new
Right.
leadership at our organization, new leadership at the county exec's office.
That's my point. I think
Yeah.
I feel more hopeful than I did. Speaking of trend lines,
What's your trend?
when I started, my 10-month trend line here in this, things aren't perfect, but I think there's a path. I can see the light, and this was a great presentation. I think we've got the pieces together. We've got opportunity. As with anything, it could go down, but I think we have an opportunity to head in the right direction and get things together. So I just wanted to end on a positive note. And I have to give Snacklings a shout out. Who got a pitch with last night. Speaking of venture funding, got some Mark Cuban venture funding last night on Shark Tank, and I tweeted it, and Mark Cuban retweeted it. So
I saw your tweet, and I thought you were going to be bringing us snacks
no,
today
I'm hoping
to
to
celebrate Montgomery County's economy. I'm a little hungry.
Tweet our tweets, so good for you.
Well, hey, it's a share, but we're all one Montgomery County,
They're a
so.
great company, and they have a great story. And just really quickly, they were at Union Kitchen, and they are just one of the golden children at Union Kitchen, right? But they needed to expand, and so they came here, and they have a spot right by the Twin Brook Metro Station, and they're able to access all of their continuum of employees who drive in and work, and then also some of their creative folks who come in from DC, and I think that's great.
Awesome.
That's the kind of business that's been a focus with the, not the food,
Moco Made
Moco Made.
in the Food Council.
Yeah. Like that whole sector.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And it's
not the only
growing.
example of a
Yes.
new company in that area. That's
Yep.
great. All right. Thank you. I think we're wrapped up. Appreciate your time. Great work. Thank you.